You have to remember, this is not going to solve itself. This is not going to go away without millions of people taking action. And are you going to be one of those millions? And then we need to remember the role that privileged people have in these moments in resistance. If I, as a white, middle-class, able-bodied person, am feeling scared, imagine how my colleagues are feeling if they are trans or Black or brown or migrant.
Greetings and welcome to YAS Podcast, formerly known as
YAS Stripper Podcast.
This is our podcast, all of ours.
A podcast for all sex workers.
In this podcast, we will discuss the ins and outs, ups and downs of our lives and experiences as sex workers. I am your host, Daisy Ducati.
I am your Hopra, Gigi Holiday.
I'm your stripper queen from the north,
Onyx. I'm AM Davies, and this is YAS Podcast. Hi, everyone. My name is AM Davies, and I will be your host today on YAS Podcast. Thank you so much for being here with us. Before we get into today's episode, I want to remind you that YAS Podcast is produced by YAS Work, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to changing public perception through media. If you love our podcast and you've been listening, please consider donating. Donations like yours keep this project going. Head to yaswork.org/donate. Let's talk about today's guest. Today on YAS Podcast, we have Savannah Sly, a sex worker activist who works with New Moon, which provides support to sex worker and survivor-led organizations in the U.S., working to advance self-determination for people with lived experience in the sex trade. Hi, Savannah. How are you today?
I'm doing great today, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for being here. So can you please confirm with our audience what your pronouns are?
I go by she and they.
Great. And do you identify as a sex worker?
I sure do, perhaps too much so. It's a part of my identity.
It is.
Yeah.
So how long have you been doing sex work for?
Since I was 18, so over 20 years.
Okay. Yeah. That's a while.
It's a while. And
Yeah.
I am so glad to have found sex work
Yeah.
the moment I turned 18.
Right on. Oh, wow. Like, that's so great. Like, when I was 18, I definitely wanted to get into it. But my mom wouldn't let me. But she's like all about it. Like, she understands so much more now. She's gotten a lot of education over the last 20 years. So, but yeah, that must have been so great. I started when I was 21, but 18 would have been rad. Yeah.
It just helped me become more financially stable when I was in school, and it sure beat working at a box office for minimum wage part-time.
Is that what you were doing initially?
Around school, yeah.
Yeah.
So stressful. I started getting gray hair
At 18?
because of financial stress, and I just never looked back.
That's awesome. I love that. So what about your sex worker advocacy? When did you start doing that? Like, what drew you into doing sex advocacy that you're into now?
Well, my family was impacted by the war on drugs. When I was in 8th grade, our house in Vermont was raided by the FBI because my father had been caught crossing state lines with a whole lot of marijuana. And that's when I learned that my musician artist parents sold weed. And that's where our stable income as a family came from. And my dad had to go away to prison on a mandatory minimum sentence. And so I learned very quickly about the war on drugs. And through that, I learned about propaganda. I studied Nazi Germany in high school and propaganda there. And so I always was interested in propaganda, and also understanding that law enforcement isn't necessarily here to protect us because it had ripped my family apart much harder. And my dad was a good guy, and it just seemed like such a waste of resources and very cruel. And so flash forward to, I guess I was in my mid-20s. I was in Seattle, being a dominatrix, minding my own business. And I had found sex worker community for the first time, pretty much. I'd found Swap Seattle. We were doing brunches and all this light, fluffy stuff. And then all these headlines about sex trafficking started popping up in the news. And then people's in-calls started getting raided, and our review board got shut down. It was sex trafficking, this and that. And me and my SWAT buddies thought we would be, proactive and reach across the aisle and go to these town halls about sex trafficking and be like, hey, some of us have experienced exploitation in the sex trade and what you call sex trafficking. It doesn't look like this. Let's work together because you're hurting sex workers. And we quickly realized no interest in that this was a specific campaign to eradicate the sex trade. And I'm like, oh, this is propaganda. They're saying that they want to help victims of exploitation and violence in the sex trade, but really their goal is a morality campaign to eradicate the entire adult industry. And I got all fired up, all that anger from 8th grade, 9th grade, my dad being in prison, came bubbling up, and I've been a haphazard and sometimes clumsy, but diehard advocate for sex workers' rights ever since.
Yeah. I find interesting what you said, like you guys were just minding your own business, going to brunch, and then sort of almost out of nowhere, like all of a sudden all this anti-sex trafficking stuff came up, and it kind of made a light bulb go off of my head. I'm like, wait a second. Yeah, they weren't always so anti-sex trafficking. When did that happen? Why did that happen? How did that because it wasn't so, and now it's like they're getting millions and millions of dollars through grant funding to fight sex trafficking, which we, the people in the sex trade, see as highly problematic. Do you have any idea? You sound like you might know the answer to this. How did that start?
So this is going to be very broad brushstrokes history.
Sure. Okay.
So within feminism, sex work has been a highly contentious issue. Our late and great Carol Lee, aka the Scarlet Harlot, coined the phrase sex work in the 70s because she was going to these feminist conferences where they were using phrases like the sex use industry. We know that feminists are very divided on the issue of the sex trades because some people see it as inherently exploitation and violence against women. And then some people see sex work as a form of labor where workers should be protected. And so Carol Lee coined sex work to start engaging in this conversation and saying, no, there's another side to this. It's not all exploitation. That division in feminism is so fierce that there's actually a great article that I'll send you later. Maybe you can put it in your podcast notes about strange bedfellows, where anti-sex work feminists, SWERFs, started collaborating with groups essentially like the Heritage Foundation, these far-right conservative entities who are also opposed to the sex trade because they had a common goal now of eradicating the sex trade, but for very different reasons, right? And so and then the sex worker rights movement in the 70s, 80s, 90s is gaining momentum. Sex workers are humanizing themselves. We have groups like SWAP popping up in the early aughts. Sex workers are becoming visible. And essentially onto the scene comes this woman named Swanee Hunt, who is a U.S. diplomat, lives in Massachusetts, very well connected, connected to oil money. Word on the street is that men in her family, perhaps her husband, I used to see a lot of sex workers. This is just the word on the street. I can't prove that. But Swanee Hunt is maybe a scorned woman who hates whores.
Okay.
Just suggesting
Just
that.
saying, yeah.
But I've talked to people who were part of her think tank when she, as a wealthy person, also a feminist, connected to these feminist movements, decided to put together think tanks on how do we eradicate prostitution in the U.S. And there have been leaked notes from some of these meetings, and it's been corroborated through some conversations I've had with people, that essentially this, sex workers have done a great job of humanizing themselves. They can't just be rounded up and arrested as bad women anymore. We need a new story. We need to flip the narrative. We need to frame them as victims. And this is something that's been done before. We had the white slave panic over 100 years ago to prevent racial mingling between Black men and white women. So essentially, it's a recycled narrative of trafficking hysteria that was very much manufactured and funded. And when you have the right players who are politically connected, you can turn this into a swerfy feminist issue. You can get a lot of feminists on board with this because, I mean, not many people know sex workers, right?
Right.
It's easy to buy into the idea that the entire sex trade is exploitative and violent, right? You can also, if you're a diplomat and you have political connections, you can start talking to the Democratic Party and other political entities about how we really need to stop this sex trafficking thing. And this is where you start to see a lot of federal engagement. But essentially, through Swanee Hunt's initiatives, there was a couple of targeted cities around the U.S. Seattle was one of them. It was Seattle, Chicago, Boston, I think Denver. They tried San Francisco, but they got ran out of town because the sex worker history there was so vibrant. But essentially, they did paid policing campaigns where they would, in some cases, hire entire positions onto the local prosecuting attorney's office to work with local law enforcement to do mass media around sex trafficking, but to do all these stings and these raids. So it was a manufactured hysteria around a real problem, which is exploitation of the sex trade, but it didn't help anyone, just like the war on drugs, which is why I got so pissed, AM.
Yeah. Jeez. Wow. That was really.
That's your lightning history.
Yeah. No, I love it. And I had, I know that there's big money behind these campaigns. I've seen it firsthand in the grant writing and review process that I've been a part of. And you can even you go into the bathroom, right, at a random a rest stop, and there's are you being sex trafficked signs all over the bathroom, and it's these anti-sex trafficking messaging is everywhere, which has to use up a lot of money. And then there's no money going towards the actual, or very little, I should say, not no, but there's much smaller amounts of money going to the actual organizations that are helping these people on the ground, actually helping them and not further exploiting them, which is what we're finding through the anti-sex trafficking organizations or movements that they're doing. Literally when they get raided, they're being abused by these people who are claiming to help them. It's just so it's like a circus. I can't wrap my head around the logic of it.
It's certainly not making anything better for anyone.
Right.
It is creating all these jobs in what we call the anti-trafficking industrial complex. But fortunately, I'm an example of one sex worker who became activated through the sex trafficking hysteria.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of hundreds or thousands, potentially. We've seen the movement for sex workers' rights explode in the past 10 years. We blog post about this on New Moon's website. Whereas in 2015, I was at Swap USA, and we could count 30 or 40 sex worker-led organizations in the US. There could have been more. But now at New Moon, we maintain a list of 300 and growing. So that's 1,000% movement growth in 10 years for a highly stigmatized, criminalized population that's making themselves visible. We don't have hard data around why that is, but one of our theories is that this sex trafficking hysteria, which has led to increased policing, a censorship online, SESTA FOSTA, things like that, banking discrimination with all their trafficking flags. People are coming out of the woodwork as sex workers to try and advocate for themselves. So, that's where we're at. And that's why I'm here, is because of all the anti-trafficking bullshit. But also the tides are turning. There are real anti-trafficking service providers now who recognize that they've been fed a bunch of garbage about what sex trafficking is. And there are groups that actually work with sex workers now to mitigate exploitation. So the Cupcake Girls in Oregon and Nevada is a great example. Freedom Network USA, which is the biggest network of anti-trafficking service providers, they have a very firm statement about being pro-decriminalization and not harming sex workers. Sex workers have done a good job of flipping that narrative. So yay us.
Oh my God. Yes. I love good news. It's so nice to hear good news. So literally they flipped. Literally they were like, we're anti-sex work, and then they learned something new. They learned new stuff, and they were like, oh, we get it now? That happened?
It turns out, so there's political operatives and then there's service providers. And then there's people with lived experience in the sex trade. If you're a political operative and you don't like sex work, you don't like prostitution, you can spin a bunch of bullshit to convince the public and the government to crack down on sex trafficking, right? You can spread propaganda. And that's going to affect people with lived experience. And those people with lived experience at some point are going to encounter service providers. Service providers are not necessarily political operatives. A lot of people get into social work and service provision because they want to help. And so if you're wanting to help, if you've been told that there's hundreds of thousands of sex trafficking victims who have been chained to a radiator and gang raped at a very young age, and that is all that there is. That's what the entire sex trade is. You're going to go into your profession looking for that. And when you don't find that, and you find something very different, or when you see that police raids are actually hurting people in the sex trade, or the services you're providing are not competent or relevant, you're going to start getting angry that you were fed a bunch of bullshit, and you're going to
I
start
see.
wondering how you can actually help people.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there are actual sex trafficking victims that need to be helped. And my concern is, are you actually helping those people with these laws and with the systems of, rating and doing X, Y, and Z that's harmful? And like, so are the actual sex trafficking victims being helped by these organizations? I don't expect you to know the answer to that.
I've
But
met people with a lot of different circumstances. I've
Mhm.
met people who have benefited from a raid and rescue situation.
Okay.
But then I know a sex trafficking survivor who was straight up being pimped out, and there was an underage girl in the same house being pimped out. Police bust down the door. She gets arrested as the trafficker, and now this trafficking survivor is on a sex offender registry as a trafficker, despite having been subjected to exploitation herself.
Okay.
And then also the police can sometimes be a source of violence. So it's like, in the United States, we're just really backwards about how we extend help. We tend to force help
Yeah.
without asking people what is helpful. And when you
Right.
lead with law enforcement, it can be traumatic. It can be a different kind of trauma on top of what you're already experiencing.
Right.
So, if you want to learn more about this, I'm not a service provider, but there's so many great people. You could talk to Swap Behind Bars, or Emmy
Yeah.
Koyama is an amazing resource about this, or anyone from Cupcake Girls or Freedom Network USA.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I do read Swap Behind Bars. I get their notifications. I read their stuff quite a bit. Yeah, they do incredible work. Thank you so much for, sort of getting into that, because I know a decent amount, but I'm also still learning it. It's such a huge topic. And it's very nuanced and complex. So yeah, thanks for breaking that down for us. You've mentioned at one point in our correspondence that you mentioned that you've been learning difficult but necessary lessons about white supremacy culture, ableism, and the hierarchy. Can you expand on that a little bit and how those lessons have changed your advocacy work?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned earlier, I kind of stumbled into activism. I saw the sex trafficking hysteria affecting my community in Seattle in really dangerous ways. And I was connected to Swap Seattle at the time, and we decided to take action. Um, Not a lot of us had very much experience with activism. I had none. I was a white kid from Vermont, um, who had a lot of trauma that was dredged up through seeing propaganda and realizing this was a war on drugs all over again. So I was compelled with a powerful energy to get involved and to take action. And so I stumbled into activism without knowing how you actually change a law, how you actually know who your lawmakers are, or how to talk to them, how to talk to the media, how to community organize. We a lot of us do these things instinctually, but also I stumbled into it as a super white privileged person, not understanding how different people in the sex trade are affected doubly, triply, multiply by systems of injustice.
Mm-hmm.
So I had zero analysis around racial justice, trans justice, what immigrants go through, or ableism. I didn't know about any of these things, and I'm still learning every day. And so um, I learned a lot of hard lessons as a white person, powerfully charged to get a lot done, but just sort of stumbling through it, and having my colleagues call me out or call me in at different junctures and in different ways. Um, and so it wasn't really until I remember there was so many hard moments where people were upset with me, and I wasn't sure why. I wasn't sure what I was doing. And essentially they're like, you're replicating systems of harm. You're acting in white supremacy, which when you hear these things, can be, startling. You're like, I don't think I am, because you don't know how you're affecting other people when you're embodying a culture of dominance. Um, and it wasn't until I found, I think it's called Principles of White Supremacy Culture. It's a document with clear bullet points. Happy to find that if you have show notes.
I think I've seen that.
It's
Yeah.
so helpful for someone like me who's white and middle class and privileged to break down what is white supremacy culture, what are its characteristics. So, um, uh, progress is bigger, better, more. A constant sense of urgency. Only I can do it. Paternalism, a word that I didn't really know about until I read this document. And then it provides antidotes for these things, right? So instead of only I can do it, it's like learning how to work in a collective and how to share work. And also you have to adjust your constant sense of urgency, right? With everything's an emergency, we got to do it now. Way progress doesn't happen like that, and you can't move together with a constant sense of urgency. Worship of the written word. There's so many different principles in this document that were like holding up a mirror to myself and realizing like, oh, okay, so what I'm seeing here is the way that I organize naturally, instinctually, is a product of my upbringing, of having had a certain kind of education, of being in a culture that rewards entrepreneurialism and a certain kind of corporate sensibility. And so I was like, for instance, like I wasn't prioritizing relationship building. I was prioritizing goal setting and getting the goal accomplished, which is like, we got to change the law. And it's like, we got to be in this for the long haul. We could change a law and they could fucking flip it the next year. And then and if we
Yeah.
don't have strong relationships and communities and networks, we're not going to have the sustainability to hold the line over the long term. Also, the only I can do it. I see this a lot. This sense of I'm the only activist who's passionate enough about this. I have the bandwidth. I have the time. I got to do this, and just feeling like you have to. It's like that leads to burnout. That leads to only one or two people making important decisions. It means you're not getting to know the communities that are also affected by these laws, but maybe in ways that you don't understand or know about. You could end up accidentally throwing a whole second portion of your community under the bus. And so you have to be in consultation and relationship with the movement and with people who also engage in sex work who might not look like you, work like you, move like you, because you need to understand what their priorities are. Otherwise, you might just be adding to the problem. And what you're doing might not be very successful. But like,
Right.
we all have diverse skill sets and things that we bring to this, and we can talk to different kinds of lawmakers.
Yeah.
And we got to be working together. So that, yeah, I had a crash course in these hard lessons and wanted to talk about it today.
Yeah, we definitely should link that in the description. I also found that document to be extremely helpful. Specifically, I remember the words that stood out to me were perfectionism. Yeah. And then definitely the sense of urgency thing. That was something that I had struggled with for a long time. Like it has to get done. It has to get done now, and being frustrated when other people weren't getting it done at the pace that I was able to get things done. And now I'm just like, the only person putting that urgency in the room is me.
Yeah.
Yeah, on
Hmm.
myself and then on other people. Yeah. Because even if you're not saying, "Oh, you're taking too long," it's just the energy and how you show up in the room,
Which
right?
is going to shut people down because also
Right.
that's a privilege thing. It's like I was showing up with, all systems go. We got to stop this bullshit sex trafficking thing in Seattle. I was a dominatrix. I was making fine wages for myself. I was stable. I'm able bodied. I have access to computers and technology.
Mhm.
So I can respond very quickly. And that is not respecting people with different capacities. It's not respecting people who maybe have disabilities, who just can't show up like that right then and there. It might not be reflecting the fact that people's lives are more complicated than mine, or they have other bigger urgencies in their life
Right.
that might have to do with like fundamental needs, or
Yeah.
not everybody has access to a computer and they can't hop on a call right then and there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not everybody has a car to get in to go to the state house right then and there, right?
Totally.
Your organizing has to shift around the collective, and that really took a while for me to learn. And I had wonderful colleagues who um, helped me learn those lessons and stayed in communication with me, even when they had to kind of smack me around a little bit
Mhm.
to really listen.
Yeah, I get that. That's great that you had that. I given like the atmosphere in today's world, right? We're right now we're recording on August 21st. This recording will come out in October. Um so things might be very different in 2 months because things are changing very rapidly. And so with that in mind, I'm still maintaining my, okay, one day at a time, nothing needs to be rushed. At the same time, watching this rush of heavier and heavier things come down on us. Like, what advice would you give, or how are you coping with the like deluge? Am I using that word right?
Yeah, it's totally a deluge.
You know?
They're just dumping
Right.
terrible things on us, and it's affecting the whole world.
Right.
So there's a lot there to talk about. How am I coping? It's a vacillating experience. In my personal little bubble in Vermont, things seem fine. It's summer. It's beautiful. Um, but I also work in philanthropy now through New Moon. So it's like I'm getting emails and I'm on Zooms every day about the global funding crisis that is
Mhm.
totally unnecessary, but a lot of which is because of the Trump administration.
Yeah.
Um, Cutting off PEPFAR, USAID. We also have the global fund at the UN that's being reduced and shifted around. And then we have conservative governments like in the Dutch parliament, and they're cutting their feminist funding significantly over the next 4 years.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah. So
Okay.
there is anyways, so it's like I'm fine in my little world, but then when you tune in or you have friends living in Los Angeles or Washington, D.C., which are occupied right now,
Yeah.
or if you have trans friends who cannot get their passports, right? Or
Right.
you migrant friends who don't want to leave their houses. Um, it's all it's right here and it's really happening. And so this leads me to a state of fear. I think a lot of us experience a state of fear.
Mhm.
And I've been really trying to, in light of everything we just talked about with privilege and being in movement, reminding myself to root into these principles as opposed to leaning into the comfort of privilege, right? It's very tempting to lean into the comfort of privilege uh, when shit's really going down, but it's a temporary sense of safety because they're coming for everybody, right? Anybody who's not their dominant culture type, a white man, um, is in the crosshairs. And so leaning into comfort could be not taking action, tuning out, um, leaving the country, like I'm thinking about that. Um,
Yeah.
Maybe hiding, changing. I'm going to change my shit. I'm going to stop doing all this activism stuff. I'm make myself a smaller target, right? These are all things that have gone through my mind.
Yeah, mine too. That's why I'm reacting. I'm like, it's like you're in my head.
I had
Yeah.
the FBI raid my house and my dad went away for a long time, and that was for a fucking marijuana charge. So it's like, if you know what they're capable of personally, it's terrifying, Um, but then you have to remember, this is not going to solve itself. This is not going to go away without millions of people taking action. And are you going to be one of those millions? And then we need to remember the role that privileged people have in these moments in resistance. And I mean, if I, as a white, middle class, able bodied person, am feeling scared, imagine how my colleagues are feeling if they are trans or black or brown or migrant, or counting on different types of social services,
Yeah.
public good, SNAP, Medicaid, all of that. Imagine how scared they are. Um, I have more choices than other people. Not everybody has any choices. So if I decide to disengage or if I decide to flee, I'm not saying don't keep yourself safe. You need to balance this. And this isn't about being a human sacrifice. But this problem is not going to stop if we don't show up and do something about it.
Right.
And privileged people got to really show up around this because everybody has so much to lose, especially our colleagues who are not as privileged. And so what can you do? I think one of the most terrifying things about what's happening right now is the seeming total lack of a game plan, right? And swift dismantling of all of our institutions and laws that we just thought would somehow be upheld, but we're dealing with total thugs, high-powered, smart thugs that have been planning for this for a long time.
Yeah.
And they're very well coordinated and they're very well funded. And so I think getting local is where it's really at right now.
Okay.
You have to be in community locally. You need to be engaged in your local elections. Who's in charge? Who's doing what? Who are those people? How are they responding in this moment? If they're on our side and they're actually standing up to this bullshit, they need to know that we have their back. Like elected officials who are resisting need to know that their constituents are with them. I can only imagine what it's like to be an elected official right now who's a reasonable person, right? Terrifying, right? It's like, we've had politically motivated murders happening in Minneapolis, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Knowing who your elected officials are so you can get really engaged and be really supportive and also try and combat any bullshit candidates who are going to try and continue to take power. I've been getting plugged into my local Indivisible group because, it's like they have a visibility brigade. And so I've been standing on bridges with them and holding signs for anybody who drives by to be like, whatever the message is, free the files and free DC, or stop bombing Gaza, or whatever they're doing. I am doing that with them.
Right.
And they're in charge and they're leading. But so get plugged in with your local resistance group, and Indivisible is a great place to start.
Okay.
Yeah, also just talking to everybody locally about this. Like people ask me how I'm doing, and this is what I want to talk about. Be like, I'm fine, but the world is not.
Exactly.
About it because I have people in my life who voted for Trump. They are all white men, and if they want to have a friendship with me, we're going to talk about this almost every time I see them, so that I can understand why they voted that way and so that they can understand the impact. And so at some point, they feel challenged to also join resistance because they're not,
Yeah.
And that's a whole other conversation, is talking about like, why did men who have otherwise seemingly progressive values push the Trump button?
Agree. That's such a great question.
Yeah. So you got to talk to those bitches, and you essentially stepped on a landmine for all of us.
Yeah.
You're not directly impacted, and you're not going to feel the impact until it's economic.
Right.
So explaining to them that they voted against all the women in their life, all the queer people in their life, any Black or brown person in their life, any immigrant in their life, they voted against everybody's safety.
Disabled people as well. Yeah.
People as well. Children. They voted against children.
Yeah.
And they voted against themselves in many
Yeah.
cases,
Ultimately, yes.
because they're usually working class or working poor white men, who are feeling nihilistic right now. And so if you have the bandwidth, which not everybody does, this is also a thing of privilege, I think, is talking to people who voted that way and being like, this is fucked. This is not what you voted for. What are you going to do about it?
Right. Yeah. That's really helpful. That gives me a lot to think about. I've not done that quite yet. So it's inspiring.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
Hard. You have to have like a little self-care plan around it.
Yeah.
Mine requires physicality, while jujitsu for the past year and a half. And it's like, I go to the mats and I wrestle out these conversations.
Okay.
If I didn't have that in my life right now, I don't know if I could even handle having these conversations because they're so so frustrating and
Yes.
make me feel so much despair.
Yes, I understand that completely. The Queer Sex Workers Initiative for Refugees in Kenya is doing incredible work, despite the hurdles they experience in a country where being queer or a sex worker is illegal. They pay rent to maintain a shelter for their community members, one where they provide food and teach skills like creating crafts and jewelry. Their shelter and work is a safe haven for Kenyan refugees that identify as queer and or a sex worker. Visit qswir.org to learn more and to donate to their mission. What about, sex workers resisting fascism in their local community and building community? Because you mentioned Indivisible. Do they talk about or rally around sex work at all, or is it a safe space?
I've worked with, I think that really varies person to
Sure.
person. Indivisible is a grassroots movement. So it's a bunch of individuals, and individuals have different levels of understanding
That makes
around
sense.
complex issues like the sex trade.
Mm-hmm.
But I've worked with powerhouse indivisible advocates here in Vermont and in Washington State who are super pro sex workers' rights and very much allies on a litany of issues. So, but also you don't got to front and center your sex workerness just to show
Right.
the protest or show up to the thing. In fact, maybe you don't want that's your call. You
Right.
know?
Of course.
But as far as what sex workers are doing right now, we have a book we can read that's very exciting. It's called Not Your Rescue Project.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We just interviewed them.
Oh, excellent. Excellent.
Yes. Yes.
Ben Gallant and Elaine Lam,
Yes.
Butterfly Collective in Toronto. That book is a playbook for sex workers resisting fascism and organizing.
Yeah.
So, got to check it out. We also need to remember that most sex workers have been living under or evading authoritarianism just by nature of being sex workers. We are so much further ahead of the game than the general population because we have had to avoid surveillance, navigate criminality, have multiple personas, and separate our data privacy. We just have a higher level of understanding of what it means to kind of front and center a certain kind of security culture. And also, we tend to have a natural analysis at some level of what's going on. Like I had my analysis of the war on drugs, and then being a sex worker. It has just helped me instinctually understand more of this bullshit in a deeper way than people with vanilla jobs, right? So check out Not Your Rescue, and then get with your local sex worker group because I don't know about you, but being in community at the very least with other sex workers brings me so much energy and
Yeah.
joy. And it's something that I need to keep going, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I find so much energy in sex worker camaraderie, more so than with a lot of my other friends. And I do have other friends. I love us so much. And I think that we are radical and we inspire me, So if
Yeah.
you're inspired by sex worker boldness and audacity and daring, get with your local sex worker groups. Try to remember and center the lessons that we've learned during like the George Floyd racial justice uprising or what we're calling the trans tipping point, and understanding, the realities of our LGBTQ and particularly our trans community members. Learn a lot about what's going on with migrants right now and what they're under. And I'm saying this, I feel like I'm kind of talking to white people. I'm sure that all different kinds of people listen to your podcast.
Mhm.
But we're all under attack. And the more we know about how we're all being targeted, the better we can show up for each other and also
Right.
protect ourselves. Cause it's like a lot of the things that they're doing right now were things they tested on sex workers, right? Different kinds of surveillance,
Yeah.
different kinds of technological tracking of people and discrimination. Like we understand these tactics. And so we know that what might affect one of our colleagues but doesn't affect you immediately will eventually come to affect you. And the more we all understand that, the better we can move together.
Yeah. I've been spending time lately, like trying to say publicly, sex workers are the ones that are seeing it and saying these things that have been already coming first. and it feels like y'all aren't listening. And then the thing comes and you're like, oh, I didn't know about this. Because even though we were like a whole bunch of us, I feel like we kind of do it at the same time as these things come up. We notice it. We find these obscure articles and bring them more to the front. And we've been talking about surveillance. And they're just like, sometimes I feel like we're just screaming into the void. And what I've really been noticing lately is that it's like dawned on me. I'm like, oh, even like the left, like even the progressives aren't really including sex workers in the conversation, and they're not really listening. And that realization lately has really kind of been bumming me out.
I'm sorry for your realization.
So
It's
late.
a bummer.
Yeah.
Well, that's been a bummer that I feel like a lot of us have been experiencing. It's like I've been doing sex worker advocacy for maybe 12 years or something. I know people have been doing it for decades, and that bummer is a constant.
Yeah.
But there are people on the left who recognize that sex workers are canaries in the coal mine for creeping human rights violations. And also, it's not just us. We're not the only canaries. Black Lives Matter was all about police brutality. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
What are we seeing now with masked men abducting
Right.
streets and just brutalizing people? Like, it's like Black Lives Matter. It's like the
Yeah.
police are unchecked and out of control, and we live in a militarized society. So it's like we're not the only canaries,
Of course.
but we are definitely canaries, and we are canaries because sex work is so intersectional, and there are people of color and disabled people and migrants and everybody, all the marginalized identities are represented within sex work. And so looking at how a society treats sex workers is indicative of how everybody's going to be affected, right?
Right.
Essentially. And how whole entire communities are being over-policed, surveilled, discriminated against, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about what New Moon is up to? Are you able to share some of that work? Yeah, I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, thanks. So, in a nutshell, New Moon launched quietly in 2022. We have 3 buckets of work. We're national. The full name is New Moon Network. And our 3 buckets of work are engaging philanthropy. So philanthropy is like charitable giving on a large scale. So everybody kind of recognizes the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Foundations usually give out money for charitable causes or to advance things that are for the social good. Ideally, there's also far-right foundations, that give out money for advancing fascism and Christian nationalism and all that shit. So, but at New Moon, we're trying to talk to philanthropy about the role of sex workers in everything we just talked about. It's like, if you care about Black liberation, if you care about trans rights, if you care about anything on the left, then you should also care about sex work, and you should be engaging and supporting the sex worker rights movement, because again, we are a metric by which we can determine how these different communities are faring, and how they can advance their human rights initiatives. So we engage philanthropy, and then we try and unlock funding by different means. We might meet an individual funder and be like, hey, you really ought to be giving your money over here, or you can give it to New Moon. And so we're what we call an intermediary fund. Our second bucket of work is to move money into the movement. So occasionally we'll get some funding or we'll get a grant, and we can disperse that grant to these sex worker rights organizations across the country, of which we think there's around over 300. We offer 5 $1,000 micro grants every month, and any sex worker or survivor-led organization can apply for those. But then also we've been engaged in something called seed funding, where we found 15 sex worker groups around the country engaged specifically in work that could prevent or treat HIV. We got a grant from ViiV Healthcare, and they kind of center HIV. They do HIV pharmaceuticals. They gave us some money to find those 15 groups and give them $1,000 a month to support their work. And then our third bucket of work is capacity building, right? So we know it takes more than money. Like, if you had given fired up Savannah $1,000 a month 12 years ago in Seattle, then it would have been like, fuck yeah, we're going to print out a bunch of stuff that I'm going to write and I'm going to print out because only I can do it,
Yeah.
And then my colleagues are going to see all this printed material and be like, this is really incredibly problematic language. We should throw this out. Sorry, you just don't know. You just don't know until you know.
Yeah.
But so we know it takes more than giving people money.
Yeah.
And at New Moon, we're trying to create the tools that we wish we had as activists to be more effective in achieving our goals. So, for example, with these 15 groups that we're giving $1,000 a month to, we're inviting them into a cohort to talk about HIV/AIDS prevention and treatment best practices, and also treating them as experts and leaders, as direct service providers, and helping them know each other. So we have a network of our own
Nice.
providers in the U.S. We host a school called Spokes Hub, where sex workers and survivors come and teach on any topic, hard skills like engaging the media, or it's kind of deep dives like, what is it like to be an unhoused sex worker, and what do people need to know? What are safety concerns for male sex workers, and how are they different from other kinds of sex workers? So topical deep dives to try and understand each other better, right?
Mhm.
People can graduate from that program, and then we strive to support their work as advocates by offering them financial compensation for advocacy work that they do out in the world. So if you're talking to a journalist, you should fucking get paid because
Right.
you're an expert. You are uniquely positioned to inform that journalist, and also it's it's a risk to talk to journalists.
Yes. Very much.
And you should have somebody. You should get some compensation for that. If you're a graduate of Spokes Hub, you can access that. And also, we're here to cheer you on. And also, if you need a sounding board, like, hey, I'm talking to this journalist, how should I prepare? Right? We can try and help you through that through technical assistance. So that's what New Moon has done since 2022. Those 3 areas of work: engaging philanthropy, moving money into the movement, and then offering capacity building support.
Mhm.
But now we're under fascism. How can we stay relevant in this moment? I have a co-director, Melody KG. She's amazing. So we co-lead New Moon together. We're a very small team. We work with a lot of consultants, but we're running a survey right now with anyone who has received money from New Moon, asking them a lot of questions about how they're being impacted since Trump took office again, how they as a team are being impacted as individuals, and how their communities that they serve are being impacted. What are their priorities right now? What do they need the most right now? What do they have to offer the broader movement? And so we're going to close this survey at the end of August. I know this is airing in October. Hopefully by then we're going to have some data about how our movement is being affected, what kinds of funding we've lost. We take that information to philanthropy, and also we as New Moon can adjust what we're offering, especially with capacity building, to be responsive to what the movement needs right now. So for
Incredible.
things that we have done to date, it's like we've spent a few months in a security transition. We're trying to stop using US-based tech giants. It's kind of a gamble as to whether that's actually more secure than sticking with Google.
Right.
But we're trying to find new tools and get fluent in them. So if anybody else in our movement or our allies want alternatives, we can walk them through that transition. We have offered different privacy security tools to individual advocates in our movement who are higher profile to help with their data privacy online. And then we've deployed a bunch of $1,000 micro grants to direct service provider sex worker groups in the US, encouraging them to buy supplies now that might become harder to get or illegal to get. So your Plan B, your Narcan, whatever you use a lot of that might be criminalized soon or cut off. We were distributing funding and raising funding specifically for that.
Wow.
It's really hard to know what to do in this moment beyond that.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like incredible work. Thank you so much for doing all that and for sharing all of that.
Yeah, I love it so much. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, you can tell. That's awesome. Is there anything that before we close out that you want to say or that you want our audience to know or in general? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. New Moon supports and works with anyone with lived experience in the sex trade. We want to de-silo this whole sex worker versus survivor thing. We know that a lot of people have both experiences. So regardless of how you identify, you're invited to Spokes Hub, which is our peer learning academy online. Come take classes with your peers. We're probably going to have more peer support drop-in spaces. That's something people are requesting in this time. Strategize, drop in together, connect. Also learn some hard skills. So come check out Spokes Hub. Also, we do offer those 5 $1,000 micro grants every month. You can apply for one of those. Tell us about your work. We want to know who you are. We want to know what you're doing. You can also just email us. Let's say you're starting a new sex worker initiative, or let's say you're interested in fundraising, or you have a question about, hey, how do we change the law locally? You can reach out to us at any time and we will tell you everything we know. We have a really well-informed team and we love just talking it out with people, especially if they're newer activists.
Yeah.
So drop a line anytime.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And can you tell, would you like people to, if they wanted to find you personally, do you have an account, like social media accounts that you let people follow? Did you want to mention
Sure.
that? Okay.
Well, first, New Moon online, it's newmoonnetwork.org. There's also there's other groups with similar names.
Like
Some
a
of them,
marketing firm, I think.
yeah. So, for senior living activities,
Mhm.
and I kind of love that we're hard to find, makes it harder to dox. But newmoonnetwork.org, you can find all this information there. I'm Savannah Sly. I deleted all my data off of Twitter. Fuck that place. So don't message me there, but you can go to savannahsly.com and check me out. Or I'm on Blue Sky as Savannah Sly.
Nice. We just got on Blue Sky, so
Nice.
I'll be sure to find you on there. Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great. And thanks again for having me. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us as well. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. And don't forget to check us out on our website at yaswork.org and click that donate button if you liked what you listened to today. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.